Welcome everyone to another Taos Machine Translation webinar. My name is Milica Panic and I will be one of your hosts today. If we've set everything up right and go to webinar, you should be able to see me and also see a few other faces on the screen. So here with me today is Rodrigo Cristina from Capita Translation and Interpreting, our featured speaker, and Anderson Vaz from Taos, another speaker later today. Hi, Rodrigo. Hi, Anderson.
Hi. Hello. Hi, Milica. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for joining us today. And we also have Janice Campbell and Alana Levy, who are regular co-hosts and who will be running the panel at the end of this webinar. Thank you, Janice. Thank you, Alana, for making the time for us today.
Good to be here.
Yeah, great. This is the MT webinars from Taos are a platform for all the users, providers, and developers of machine translation technologies out there who have interesting use cases or technology news to share. Normally, we talk a lot about the technology itself, the most recent developments, the data, the different experiment results. But today we'll talk about a slightly different aspect of machine translation. We'll take a sort of business or financial look at implementing machine translation in in any scenario. So. We'll look at how you can calculate the return on investment and how you can really sort of go into implementing machine translation with confidence. And that is only possible if you have ways to measure and if you also have, the tools to have that tough business case conversation and the budget conversation with your management. So that's what Rodrigo will go into shortly. He'll walk you through a financial model, a model that he sort of adapted and tested internally at Capita Translation Interpreting. And then we would like to share a little bit of news from Taos, specifically from the data side of the house, and some of you who are on our newsletter list probably already received a notification that the Taos Data Cloud is retiring. It sounds scary, but it actually is very exciting for us because the Data Cloud retirement doesn't mean that Taos Data is retiring in its entirety. It actually means that it will grow and morph into something bigger, namely the data marketplace platform. So Anderson Vaz will walk you through the project timelines and the exciting features that this new platform will offer. And then at the end, we go into questions and answers. So there won't be any questions asked before, but we will keep them all for the end. Janice and Alon will lead the panel discussion and we'll pick up the questions from the audience. So in GoToWebinar, there is a chat module, so you can post your questions there. And please make sure to stay until the end to hear the answers to your questions. Another important thing to mention here is that these webinars are being recorded. So if you, for some reason, have not heard a part of it, or you want to review and replay this this session, you will be able to do so probably already tomorrow when we will share this recording with you. And I think I've said everything. And with no further ado, I would like to give the word to Rodrigo to walk us through the net present value model. Rodrigo, I'm making you the presenter. And I think you're now prompted to share your screen.
Good. I hope that I'm reaching loud and clear to everyone. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to present and discuss this return on investment machine translation model. And also, first of all, thank you to Taos, and also thank you to all of you for taking the time to attend and listen to my presentation. So my name's Rodrigo Cristina, and I believe I have the best icebreaker in the localization industry, which is my surname, Cristina. I mean, the amount of times I've changed gender or marital status are countless, and it becomes even funnier when people get to know me for the first time and they're expecting a Cristina, and in fact they get a Rodrigo. On a more serious note, I am a strategic business manager for Capita Translation and Interpreting, which is, a fancy title that I normally break down to a customer localization champion. I've been in the localization industry for about 15 years, and throughout this beautiful and wonderful journey, I've learned that my customer's success is my own success and my company's success. And it was pretty much embedded with this, I would say, spirit of mission that I started looking at solving this common question that many times localization managers and localization stakeholders in general have, which is how do I quantify, or how do I put a number in terms of the return on investment, in this particular case to a machine translation program that I know that in my heart will positively change my localization strategy. So that was sort of the starting point for this model that I adapted and applied to machine translation. But before we get into the model itself, I'd like to briefly, shortly present you the company that I work for, Capita Translation and Interpreting. So we are a customer-loving localization solution provider with a hands-on approach, all about problem solving. And we achieve this with our customers through combining our people, automation, best practices, optimized processes, all of this brewed in a translation ecosystem supported by our homegrown technology, SmartMate and LiveLink. It's important probably to mention that SmartMate is the translation technology suite, which includes both a translation management system and homegrown proprietary machine translation technology that's been around for 10 years, and for the last years it has become increasingly neural. I would say even that neural is probably the new normal. So as you can see, from the slides, Capita is pretty much a one-stop shop for all things localization, as you would probably expect from a mature and established localization partner. When it comes to our machine translation approach and philosophy, first of all, I think the philosophy is quite important, which is we see machine translation as a facilitator, not an end in itself. And I would say that Capita, it's fair to say that Capita lies between the traditional language service providers and the traditional MT developers. So we harvest the best of the two worlds. So we have our own proprietary technology called SmartMate Machine Translation that allows us to customize or to build customized machine translation engines, nowadays typically neural. But on the other hand, we also have access to a very large pool of specialized linguists that do post-editing. So in all fairness, Capita offers a full end-to-end machine translation solution for our clients. And that is sort of how I started thinking about building this machine translation return on investment model. So, this is, of course, to answer a very old but very present and probably very future that will keep coming in the future question, which is how to measure return on investment. In fact, measuring return on investment in localization is many times complex, and it's a starting point for tough and hard discussions to be able to convince a localization budget holder that the company should invest and will get some sort of return or financial return through a particular localization or machine translation program is tough, and it sometimes that tends to go into a subjective area to which I call many times dark art or sort of dark magic. As I have a bit of the dark art in my pre-localization life due to my finance and sort of business background, I decided to make an attempt to make everybody's life slightly easier when talking to the budget holders. On the other hand, I also deal with a number of global machine translation programs for Capita's clients, for Capita's global clients. And part of my job is to convince them that that deploying machine translation into their localization workflows makes sense from a financial and from an economic standpoint. So, and the reason for it is quite simple. Many times I would get into discussions with our clients, and they would ask, "How do I sell this internally?" So the idea is to allow a better quality and more quantifiable discussion and business case for whomever needs to present machine translation as a solution. So I looked at a number of investment project investment valuation models or frameworks, and I chose this one because it's I think it adheres and it can reflect better a number of things that are proprietary to machine translation technology. So to give you a very brief overview of this, the net present value. It's been around for a long time. It's widely used in a number of investment cases. It is extremely well quantifiable. So hopefully it will generate better quality business cases whenever presenting machine translation as a solution. Hopefully it will produce easier conversations, and hopefully also localization managers will be able to secure more times the budget that they require. One thing that I need to make sure that everybody understands, this is not a silver bullet, but it's just, and hopefully, a clear framework to discuss return on investment with budget stakeholders. Yeah, and that's my ultimate goal, to contribute for a better world. So the key concepts or components around the net present value are three. So, and the net present value is just an investment analysis framework that compares cash flows generated in different moments in time. It's as simple as that. It has three main components: the initial investment, which I normally call the number to beat; the cash flow, which represents the difference between revenues and savings and running costs of your investment, in this case, machine translation; and the discount factor. And the discount factor is very important, and we'll go through that in the next slide. The discount factor is very important because it represents something that you're comparing your investments with, which is the return rate of the best available investment alternative at the time that you need to choose to invest or not in machine translation. Forget about the formula. It's not really important, but that particular formula just reflects that this takes into account cash flows generated across a number of periods. And the number to beat is exactly your investment in moment zero. The NPV has a super simple the decision criteria to invest or not to invest based on how positive the number is. So if it's over zero, then you decide to invest. If it's not over zero, then you decide not to invest. Now, two concepts that are very important and very important also for whenever you're looking at a machine translation program, because you're definitely not looking at a machine translation program in 1 year or 2 or 3. So time and the discounted cash flow methodology are basically what accounts for the model's dynamic. And the difference between money today and money tomorrow is probably the most important concept that you have, because you are investing today, but in fact, what you are generating are cash flows or net cash flows, as we've mentioned in previous slides. The net cash flows are basically the difference between the revenue or savings that your machine translation program is generating minus the running costs every year. So what you are saying is that you are comparing the investment that you're making today with cash flows that are generated in the future. So in order to compare apples with apples, you need to apply what we call the discount factor. And the discount factor, as we saw in the formula, that 1 plus RR represents also at the same time the best available option for you to invest that is non-empty. It can be empty, but it's typically an alternative that is non-empty. So give you a very, very simple infographic. So this is your moment zero. Imagine that you're 2020 and you need to make a decision about to invest in machine translation. This investment that you're going to have to do now, to make now, will generate cash flows in year 1, year 2, and year 3. So 2021, 2022, and 2023. In order to compare the actual value or the actual cash value of those future cash flows, you just bring those cash flows to moment zero through the discount factor. So you pull from 2021 the amount of cash flow 1, and for year 2 and year 3, so 22 and 23. This way, you are able to compare money in the same timeline. So I decided to bring something that we probably can relate to, a quick example to help us understand better the model before we get into the application of the model to machine translation. So imagine that you have 100,000 euros available today, and you are interested in investing that money, and you have 3 options: house to rent and to sell in 20 years time, to invest continuously those 100,000 euros starting today for 20 years in the stock market, or deposit that money in a bank for 20 years. Because you're not a risk fanatic, you decide that most likely you'd prefer to invest in a house to rent and sell it afterwards. And that means that the maturity of your investment is 20 years for a house. And different investments have different maturities, as even within machine translation programs. So this is your cash flow now. So your initial investment, your I0, is 100,000. Your cash flow, as you can see, you're gonna get 600 euros of rent and 100 euros of running costs monthly. That will generate a net cash flow monthly of 500 euros, which will then be 6,000 euros per year. So that is your cash flow. Okay. Now imagine as well that your bank offers you 5% interest for your 100,000 euros during those 20 years. So this becomes your discount factor. This is your best available investment alternative when you have to make this decision, which is today. So how does this look? So as you can see, your initial investment is 100,000 euros. Your cash flow, yearly cash flow or annual net cash flow is 6,000 euros. And the return rate of your best available option, which is the bank deposit interest rate that the bank has given you for the next 10 years, is 5%. So this is the formula that is used to calculate the net present value of the house investment across the 20 years. Now, bear in mind that there is one additional factor at the end, which is the selling price of the house that you've estimated in 25,000 euros more than today in 20 years' time. So what happens, as you can see there, you have 100,000 euros, which are today, which are related to today. So in 2020, this is the money that you have to spend to get your house bought. And then you have every year for the next 20 years, 6,000 euros of cash flow that represent the difference between your monthly rent and your monthly running costs, plus what we call a residual value, which is the market value of the house in 20 years' time, so in 2040. So the only thing that you have to do is apply this discount factor and bring all those cash flows, including the price for which you're going to sell the house in 20 years, to moment zero, to compare with the investment that you're doing today. So this is the result of that particular investment in 20 years' time. One thing that's also important to mention is you can make this model as complicated as you want, and you can include as many items as you wish in both the initial investment as well as your annual net cash flow. And the accuracy of this particular model and how it will direct you to invest or not to invest is depending on the way, of course, you estimate your investment and your annual net cash flow. Very well. So how does this apply to machine translation? So we've gathered the three concepts around the net present value. So you know that you're going to have to spend money in order to deploy a global machine translation program and to deploy machine translation into your localization workflows. So these are the typical costs. There are potentially more than that, but as you can see, these are quite common costs that you would expect to incur in the beginning or in the start of deploying or analyzing or evaluating your machine translation program. So you're going to have, typically an annual license cost. You might incur in hosting costs. If there are particular features that need to be developed, those will be also coming out as a cost and part of your initial investment. Anything from optimization of your language assets to make them available for alternative engines creation, any integration that might be required from your MT software provider with, for example, an authoring tool or TMS, that can also be included. So in a nutshell, everything that you require to deploy and launch your machine translation program should be included in this initial investment amount. Now, as we've seen in the house example, hopefully, and with a very, very high degree of certainty, you will get some return and savings from your global machine translation program. The two that I've added there, which are, one is quite obvious and has to do with a potential discounted rate that you will get from applying post-editing machine translation to your content. But there could be many others. I've included that one because it's something that I feel that's really important and resonates with budget stakeholders, which is the increase of sales due to the fact that you have your products and services faster and longer in the marketplace. Now, you're going to have absolutely, and that's undeniable as well, you're going to have annual costs. And those annual costs could be anything from retraining of the existing engines to adding particular features that once the machine translation program gets going, you realize that you need. You're going to have still the annual licenses for the software and the engine hosting. So this should be your cash flow. Now, the question now, when you have to determine if you're going to invest or not in machine translation, is okay. If I don't invest in machine translation, what could I, in alternative, as an option, invest the funds that I have potentially available for MT on in order to improve my current localization setup? So anything from, an authoring tool to a massive operation of cleaning and optimizing your language assets. If you have, for example, an internal based or internal translation model, the return of hiring additional translators, in-house translators, and how much would that impact in terms of savings your localization structure. So hopefully you will be able to put a number in the return rate of your best available option. So this is the framework of the net present value applied to machine translation or to the deployment of a machine translation, a global machine translation program, including the initial cost, the revenues and savings generated across time, and also the discount factor, which will allow you to compare in the same timeline the cash flows and your initial investment. I decided to bring a case, a client case, which I think also it is important. As you can see, this is a very mature localization user and buyer. So it's a large European manufacturer with a global footprint. It localizes into over 20 languages, and it had experienced a peak in their in their top 10 languages over the last year or so. So, as you can see, there's a lot of the boxes when it comes to maturity of buyer maturity are ticked. But where do you go from there? Because this particular client was experiencing a massive peak across their tier one languages. So they started evaluating deploying a global machine translation program across those tier one languages, while evaluating also other mutually exclusive investments that were related to buying an authoring tool and a massive translation memory and glossary cleanup. So they wanted to have a basis to sell the global machine translation program internally. And that's where we came in and we helped our customer in achieving this. As you can see, these are concrete numbers here. These are the list, or this is the list of items that were considered across those across those 10 languages. And the total initial investment across all those 10 languages was 75,000 euros. So that was the initial investment that particular client had to incur to deploy machine translation across those 10 languages. As we know, we're in the second component of the model. We would expect out of the investment that we've done in machine translation that this investment would generate annually revenue. So the expected annual savings as a consequence of the discounted new word rates through post-editing machine translation was 25%, was estimated in 25%. So that brought every year 90,720 euros across all 10 languages. Also, as a consequence of applying machine translation to the localization workflow, everything in the vendor side became a lot more efficiently from a project management perspective. So the project management fee decreased from 5 to 3%, which also generated 6,910 euros of savings. So the total on the positive side of the cash flow, or if you prefer to call it running benefits, was 97,630 euros per year. In terms of costs, the running costs that we spoke about earlier, the MT license annual costs, the retraining, because that was also included in the estimated cost of all 10 languages once a year, and the hosting cost came to 36,000 euros. So now we have the cash flow determined, which was 61,630 euros every year. Now we need to also estimate the return rate of the best alternative in terms of investment to machine translation. And we estimated with our clients that the new authoring tool that they were thinking about buying, bear in mind that the investment in these alternatives is exactly the same, the 75,000 euros, as in machine translation. So the investment in this new authoring tool and the major review and cleaning the translation memories and glossaries would result in a 22% better matching. And that would save, in turn, 8% of the budget. So this became your discount factor. So the return rate of the best available option at the time. And this is sort of the actual calculations of what we've went through the previous two slides. So in reality, the net present value across these 3 years is 83,826, which meant that the decision is to move ahead with the machine translation program. I think one thing that's super important also to mention, and that is debatable, eventually arguable, is that we consider that this model, when it comes to machine translation and when it comes to deploying a global machine translation program, the maturity period of a global machine translation program and to invest in a global machine translation program is 3 years. Our data pushes us towards that conclusion, and that has been sort of the maturity level of this investment that we've been considering and applying in similar cases. So, again, if I think this is almost the last slide. Yeah. I think if you guys want to reach out to me and discuss any of the calculations, that can be fun to do, just drop me an email or and I'll be happy to answer all your questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Rodrigo. I think, yeah. So I'm currently in the process of buying a house, and I now see how this could be very, very valuable of a calculation to apply over the next 30 years. So yes. Yeah, thanks once again for this. There are already some interesting questions from the audience, but as I said, we'll take them all at the very end. So please keep them coming. What we will do now is give you a few announcements. The biggest one being the fact that the Taos Data Cloud is retiring, which again, I would like to say is not a scary thing, is only a good thing. But what I'll do in the next couple of minutes is explain why that is, what that also means for the Taos Data users. And then my colleague Anderson will tell you what the Taos Data Cloud is going to morph into later this year. So for those of you in the audience who have ever worked with the Taos Data Cloud, you might know that it's basically it's the first product-like service from Taos that started in 2008. And it was sort of based on the idea of sort of a community, a collaborative effort of sharing translation memories for the benefit of everyone in the industry. Back then, statistical machine translation was still very much used, and such a sharing that Data Cloud enabled was actually very useful for the early users and developers of machine translation. Now, 12 years later, or 11 years later in 2019, as Taos Data Cloud went through a few series of changes, changing its technology, but also going through a massive cleaning in 2016 when we removed almost half of the 73 billion words that were in the Data Cloud. So it went down to 35 billion words. So after the 11 years of its existence, we realized that we've got more and more of the potential downloaders of data, so those who really needed bigger volumes of data, but not so many of the data uploaders anymore. And aside from that, Taos Data Cloud was a simple document level search, and it very much relied on the user provided metadata. So the things like the content type or industry were metadata provided by the users themselves, and we had no easy way of verifying these things without going through an extensive effort on every single document. And then again, reciprocal upload and download worked quite fine for the very beginning, but then people were wondering, okay, but if I have data to upload, but I don't really need to download, can I earn some money from it or not? So that was not the case, and that led us to think of better ways to serve the language data to the Taos users, and it led us to the project that we'll go into in a moment, which is a data marketplace, so more of an open market leveraging and trading of language data, which has the main objective, and that is to really get as many sellers out there and fill the gap of the underserved low resource languages as its primary goal. But what that also means is that the Data Cloud, as we know it today, is retiring. So what you see here on the screen is a timeline of the specific features of the data cloud that we will phase out by the end of this year, so starting from the 31st of October. So when the data search will not be available anymore. So for those of you who use terminology search or the plugins in SDL Studio or MemoQ, that will unfortunately not be possible anymore. We will be going through a major refactoring, so we'll have to stop the effort that we need to put into these features. Data upload, which is where users are able to upload data and earn credits, will also go away on October 31st. And again, for those, especially for the users who have some remaining credits from the previously uploaded data or the purchase credits, you will be still able to discover the data and download it until the end of this year, December 31st, and also use those data cloud credits for the corpora in the data library. And now I'd like to give the word to my colleague Anderson Vaz, who is the principal data engineer at Taos, for those of you who don't know him yet, and he's first and biggest engagement is implementing the Taos Data Marketplace. So on to you, Anderson.
Thank you, Melissa. So hello, everyone. I'm going to share a little bit, a sneak peek of what's coming next at Taos, which is this project that we have started already, called the Data Marketplace. With the data cloud retiring, we still will have a legacy for sure, and most of this legacy is going to be our data, the data that the data cloud has. But our intention to create this new platform is to mainly attend these two goals that are on the screen right now, is to fill the gap for low resource language data. So we do believe that there are a lot of translators and LSP that they have data that are not so common nowadays, so language data that are not so rich available. So the idea of the marketplace is make it a welcome place for these sellers to bring their data. And adding to that, just not offering the data itself, we will enhance the data, we will clean the data, we will make this data high quality. So these are the two goals that we intend to attend with this new platform. So at a glance, this platform is going to be something that is easy for connect sellers to buyers. So whoever has language data and wants to make it available and sell it, the platform will try to make it as easy as possible. So it's going to be easy to use, easy to trade, easy to explore, and easy to trust. So sellers will see an advantage in use the platform because they can bring the data not only to trade it, but also to use the services that will make that data high quality. And those services is clean, at least at this beginning, is going to be cleaning and anonymization of this data. So you'll be able to, for instance, identify duplicates with the data and then remove it, or identify personal information within the data and ask the seller if they want to scrap it out from their data. So the seller can have this advantage on bringing their data and get already a high quality data of the data that they are bringing on. But if they decide to go a step further, they can make this data available for other people interested in buying it to find this data and actually from the platform already make purchase transactions, and the seller will get immediate payments from that. So this is it's what we intend to do with the platform, and with that we intend to attend to two main goals that we said already. So talking about the services, the main services that the platform will offer, we will have like data cleaning, data normalization, and data clustering. So getting to this service a little bit in more deep, data cleaning is about to the platform be able to identify issues with the language data that make it not so good for machine translation. So when we say that we want to have high quality data, we want to have this high quality data is intended to be used for machine translation. So in the machine translation field, any noise in the data might make the overall results not so good. So we will be able to, within the platform, identify things like language inconsistencies. Let's say that we have a set of segments, but and the segments is intended to be a translation from English to Italian, but actually not all segments follow this pattern. So it's not all segments are English to Italian. They might have also English to French, for instance. So you'll be able to detect that and suggest to the seller to remove this data. Also, typos in language that it's very common. So the platform will identify also. So we will be using different tools for that. We are at this moment evaluating which tools we will actually have in place. But all the tools that we are evaluating at the moment, they follow the high standards within the industry, and they are cutting edge. So with that, we believe that we are going to have a good accuracy on our cleaning process. Another service that we are going to offer is anonymization, which is the capability to identify things that might be sensitive within the data. And this might not be ideal to expose it to the overall public. So things like proper names, emails, URLs, addresses, and things that can be credit card numbers or SSN, social security numbers, we identify, and we will be up to the seller, to the provider of the data, if they want that information removed or not. But this is a benefit because the seller can use the platform just to identify this information within their own data. So again, for this service, we are evaluating, but tools, and we don't have the set of tools that we are going to use, but we have something already being tested that it's showing good results. And the other thing, this is more beneficial for the buyer, is for data clustering. So the seller has the advantage to bring their data, and their data is, we are going to make that data even more high quality than what it actually is. But we intend to have like a huge amount of data. Actually, also, when this platform goes live, the data that now is current on Data Cloud is going to be available, and this is already a huge amount of data. So we might have within our data from different domains, which we will classify them, and it's going to be easy for the user, for someone that is interested, to find the data. But there is a use case that is when the user, it has a portion of data, and they want to know if we have more of that data within our database. So data clustering is all about that. It's allow a user to bring their own data, a piece of it, an example of their data, and make a search using this example. And then the platform will return all the data available within the platform that matches with this example provided. So this will allow the buyers to easily find their data in a more reliable way. So here you have a brief workflow of how the platform essentially will work, essentially the main modules that we have. So it's all about publishing, exploration, and purchase. all of data. So it's publishing of data, exploration of data, and purchase of data. So unpublishing is someone that has data that wants to trade it, or even just anonymize or clean. We will upload the data. The data is going to go through initial quality check, and then we will do the anonymization, but we will not change the data in any way if the provider of the data doesn't want that. So it's going to be up to the provider, and then the provider will also define the price for their data. So it's going to be up to the provider to say whatever price they think that is best for the data. But the platform will help the provider in suggesting a price for their data based on the rarity of that data. So this is also going to be something very useful for someone that wants to bring their data but is unsure on how to price such data. And then there is the publishing. When the publishing happens, this data is going to be available for exploration. And exploration will take place in two ways. One is just simple. Everyone is going to be a public feature where everyone will be able to come and try to explore, see what kind of data the platform has. Things like it just provide like a language pair, English to Farsi, and see how much of that combination the platform has. But the other one is the one that will be more beneficial for the buyers, which is the buyers will be able to provide an example of the data that they are interested, and then get back all the data that the platform contains that matches with the example. If some interest happens from that, then a purchase transaction can be initiated, and then the data is going to be available right away to the buyer, and the seller is going to get the payment from the data right away as well. So here it's more or less what I already explained in the clustered search. So is the data clustering. So is a sample submission, and then we matching the sample with your own data. We filter what actually matches, and then we present what we have, what the platform has that matches with the provided sample. And overall, with all this in the platform, we are going to have like a constantly up-to-date data quality assurance workflow, which is essentially ensure that all the data that comes in is high quality, or we can make it high quality. So together with the things that I already mentioned, we is going to have also things like reviews. And so the buyer will be able to provide a feedback to us, reviewing the data that they bought and saying, okay, if the data actually improved their models in machine translation or not, or things like that. So our data quality assurance workflow is one of the main cornerstones of the platform to ensure that all the data traded is high quality. And to finish, this is the timeline that we have for the products. So it's demonstrated here in features. So like when I mentioned the publishing, when I mentioned the simple search, when I mentioned like the purchase, so you can see that all of these together with the clean anonymization version 1 and other things is going to be available in October of this year. So this is going to be our first launch of the platform. And from October of this year until June of next year, we will be working the clean anonymization version 2 and the clustered search, and also the rating review. And then afterwards is going to be things that we envision for the platform that will make it even better, but are things that are really far ahead in time right now. So are just things that we are estimating that can be interesting, but of course these things can change. But from now to June of 2021, this is what we have planned and what we are going to be delivering. And with that, I think I'm finished and heading back to you, Melissa. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Anderson. Indeed, a very exciting time at House. So I think we are very short on time, so let's quickly go into questions. Alon, Janice, do you have anything immediate to share?
I'm not gonna. Yeah, I don't want to ask any question because leave it for the audience, but just a comment. Thank you for your presentation, Rodrigo. And it's a very interesting way of looking at investment. I think with machine translation, we've always considered it more of a sunken cost, and what the revenue we derive is in lots of volume in a short period of time with engaging customers and retaining customers, et cetera. So, but thank you. It's a really interesting way to look at it, and I'd like to explore it further. Alon?
Yeah, I think, I have also more of a comment maybe than a question. There are basically, I think what Janice was just hinting at, that there are other sort of advantages beyond the concrete savings in the sort of traditional translation loop that machine translation brings into the picture. And those are also sometimes more difficult to quantify from a monetary or from other types of perspectives, such as dealing with large volumes, such as dealing with fast turnaround times. And the other thing that I think that occurred to me is just that there are basically some things that here are just difficult to quantify upfront. So, for example, the impact of retrainings, we basically, the costs there were basically associated with how much the retraining that have to happen on machine translation engines and so forth. The impact that might have down the road in terms of savings or quality benefits are sometimes difficult to quantify in advance. So there are numbers that are difficult to plug into your formulas. And that's really just hints at challenges of actually like doing these calculations up front before you embark, maybe, rather than doing them and then redoing them along the way, Rodrigo.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you. I think the good bit about this model is that it's super dynamic. I mean, you can estimate on estimates. You can adjust your estimates as you go along. The idea is I mean, to be very honest, this is not a model to give a solution. It's not as I mentioned, it's not a silver bullet, but it's more, as Janice was mentioning, to help us think about a non-sunken cost machine. Not looking at machine translation as a sunken cost, as a cost, but also as a revenue driver and as a revenue generator. So, and I think the model is flexible enough to allow for those adjustments that you were mentioning to happen a long time. Now, of course, they are very, very complicated to estimate upfront. And for example, the fact that the cash flow itself is exactly the same every year, it really doesn't happen in real life. So, right. and that's the only comment that I would like to add. But thank you, Alan. Thank you, Janice.
Okay, Melissa, are there any questions from the audience?
It was actually the exact same. Like, have you experimented with factoring in non-financial benefits? Just going further with sort of, risk reduction, employee turnover, things like this. So yeah. But I guess, I think you basically answered it.
Yeah, and I agree with Alon on a lot of those points, especially that if we'd had more time, we could have discussed further. But definitely, it's very difficult when you're paying on if you have a one year license, it's a little easier to figure out what's that outlay in the very initial part. But when you're paying perhaps per usage, where that's an unknown, you can predict. You can forecast, but you can't really know for sure. And that can have spikes and peaks and valleys along the way, and, averages out over a year. Maybe you can then predict for the next year. But then, how do you predict, how do you really, what's the cost of actually like training an engine? If you know how often you do it and what that cost is, or if it's a person that you've hired internally to do it, what that yearly cost of the salary is and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different ways I think that you can look at using the model and trying to see if it works. It's certainly very, very unique perspective. And I like that it really makes us think differently about what that investment is and how to sell it. Because it is, everybody looks at just the simple, what's the savings, and that's it. They don't really want to think about, what the bigger benefits are. But anyway, we're running out of time, and thank you very much for your very good perspective there.
Thank you, Rodrigo, indeed. And if anyone wants to connect with Rodrigo outside of this webinar, I hope you've caught his email address on the slides. So yeah, feel free to reach out to him and talk more. With this, we're coming to the end of this webinar. So I would like to thank everyone here for being here today, our speakers especially, and our co-chairs. If you have an MTU case that you'd like to share, or if you have a question that you would like us to find a speaker for, please reach out to us. We're always on the lookout for new things to talk about. And then next machine translation webinar will take place on July 30. So you might have noticed that we've taken sort of this last Thursday of the month as our standard date. And I will reveal that it's going to be in Tento. Won't say what it will be about, and more is to come. So keep an eye on our newsletter. Well, with that, I would like to thank you all once again, and I'm wishing you a healthy and good rest of the week and the upcoming weekend. Thank you.